Hey everybody, thanks for joining us at Sunnyside here today. I'm Trevor Cameron, our general manager. Today is pruning day. Let's talk about winter pruning. Not quite the winter yet, but we're almost there. So I had Nicole, she's in the back. She's always got the pretty flowers behind her.
Good
And
morning, everyone.
we have our special guest here again today, the Whistling Gardener, Mr. Steve Smith, will be answering your questions during class. That'll save me probably half an hour afterwards. Thanks, Steve. So you can ask him some tough ones. Make him think here today during class. All right. So hopefully everybody got a copy of the handout. It's on the website. Just some general tips for you can refer back to. Certainly a valuable tool if you want to get a copy of it. We can certainly email it to you if you didn't get it before the class as well. So we'll have plenty of time for questions. This is a tough class to get through in 45 minutes or an hour. We could talk pruning for probably a week with all the different plants we have in our gardens. But certainly ask questions to Steve. We'll have time afterwards. And keep in mind, we do this class 3 times a year. Once now in November. We'll do this again mid-January. I believe it's the 15th. That will be on more fruit and berries as we head towards late winter. And then I do another class in June that kind of covers summer pruning. So we get you a little 3 times a year. Hopefully we'll get everything covered. So I thought we'd just start with, like all the pruning classes, with a little bit of basic information, hopefully kind of teach you a couple of tricks. I'll grab my pruners here and we'll grab a branch. The first thing to me is always making a proper cut. So I borrowed a hydrangea out of Steve's yard this morning. Hopefully he won't mind. But here's a hydrangea. This was an old PG hydrangea, just so we know when we're talking about plants. This is one for sun. This is a new wood bloomer, which we'll be talking about a little later. But if I'm going to prune this down, the first type of pruning is literally heading back. This time of year with a hydrangea like this, I really just want to deadhead it so that I'm safe in the winter. I don't have anything getting wet, maybe breaking a stem. So if I look at hydrangeas, a great example of opposite buds. If I look on the stem here, I've got perfect pairs of bud at intervals all the way down the wood. Now I could prune above any one of those. If I want a little shorter, I'll cut it back down. This time of year, I just want to deadhead it. So I'm going to stick up to the top bud. You can see I'm kind of at a 45-degree angle and I want to lop that off. I've got a nice slanted slope. I'm just about a half an inch or an inch above that bud. Next spring, 2 buds come out, off we go, and I've doubled my flower. Now, being a new wood bloomer, next March, I could prune this hydrangea down a little bit further and it won't affect the flowering, but that's a topic for a different discussion. So just for simple pruning, you can see that proper cut. I've angled it. I've given space for the bud. What happens if I go right on top of that bud? It's not going to kill the plant, but this is probably not going to grow. This will now, and I'll have a dead stub come next year. So we want to make sure we don't leave extra wood. We just want a nice slanted cut just above that set of buds, and we're going to have a happy plant. Okay, so that's a good example of what we would call heading back. We're going to change the direction, cut something down for height or spread by cutting back to a particular spot on our plant. Now if we talk thinning, is what I do a lot. We do certainly utilize heading back for a number of plants, but thinning to me is a better way to go. So we borrowed a little Japanese maple branch off one of my maples in my yard this morning, just to keep it even, Steve. So I've got a branch here and I look at that. Is there anything wrong with that? Perhaps no. But if you can see that, yes, I've got some overlaying branches. I've got some crossing. I'm not interested in heading this back and shortening up my structure. I just want to open it up so that it breathes. It's got air. We've got better sun. And frankly, a nicer looking plant. So if I look at a branch like that and I start looking in here, let's do some thinning. I'm going to find spots in the center there where I haven't changed the structure of this branch, but I'm opening up areas for, again, more sun, more wood. If I just take 3 little pieces out of that, look at the difference. I've got much more room in there. I could even, frankly, thin out that entire branch and really open this guy up. Now, if that's a nice branch on my tree, I've got room to breathe. I'm not butchering it back and making a mess, but I'm letting it attain its natural beauty, but I'm taking out some wood that's crowding a little bit. So in the wintertime, we thin a lot as we look at our deciduous plants. We look at structure, things that are crossing, overlaying. We can get in there and very easily clean it up here as we head into the wintertime, okay? So we got a little heading, we got a little thinning. You saw the hydrangea, but I mentioned the hydrangea as an example of kind of a plant that has opposite buds. Again, I've got pairs of buds up and down the stem. If I look at something like 9-bark, the principles don't change. A lot of plants we would call opposite or alternate buds. So you can see here, I'm kind of zigzagging on either side of the wood. Now, my advice to you would be, if you're going to go out and prune, because I think a lot of gardeners try to do the right thing and go prune, but they don't think of where they're cutting. So if I was going to cut this branch back, let's pick the direction we want it to go. If this branch is coming out of me and I'm going out away from the center, I'm not going to cut to a place like that where I've left the branch. It's going to come right back in to the top. I hope that makes sense to everybody. I'm going to try to find a branch that's going out away, left or right, in a direction that I want the plant to fill back in or continue to grow. So if I go out with the chainsaw and the stick or my loppers and I just start topping it off, yes, you prune. No, we're not going to kill your plant, but I think when we get to next spring, you're going to have a twiggy mess as things start to regrow. And I'm sure there's some people shaking their head like, yeah, that's exactly what happened to me this spring. So if you're going to take the time, just grab your pruners. And again, the same principles. I want to leave cut above the bud that I want to keep, but I want to go at an angle with the branch that I left so that I keep that nice natural shape going. Okay. Now, as we look at, again, I'll pull up. As we get into questions, maybe Steve's answering some right now and towards the end, and we look at plants in our yard, one of the big keys to this is knowing which ones of our plants bloom on old wood and which one blooms on new wood. So if you think of a plant everybody has, like as an example, take a lilac. A lot of folks have lilacs in their yard. Right now we're turning yellow, we're dropping our leaves. If I look at the tips of all those branches, let's pretend this is a lilac, I would see my big fat flower bud sitting on there that's going to open next May that I can smell and enjoy in my yard. If I go out this winter and I cut those back, no, I'm not going to hurt my lilac, but I've just removed most of my flowering. So this gets to one of these rules that I like to talk about. It's prune after bloom. We want to wait till that lilac blooms, then we can go and prune it and not sacrifice any flowering. So if you don't care about the flower, have at it this winter. You can do whatever you like. But keep in mind, old wood blooming plants like lilac and a lot of others, if we do a hard prune in the winter, we don't get the reward of the flowering come the next year, okay? So this is an example of PG hydrangea. Again, we did that at the beginning of something that blooms on new wood. This is Mop Head Hydrangea. We haven't got cold enough for this to go dormant, so I'm not going to really do much pruning on this yet. But again, it's the same idea, except this variety of hydrangeas, one called Aisha. There's a lot of old and new wood blooming hydrangeas. This one only blooms on old wood. So if I cut it back hard, what's going to happen? I get growth, I get leaves. I'm not going to have much flowering. So just keep that in mind as we're talking about different kinds of plants. Does it bloom on new wood or old wood? And certainly give us a question or ask, and we can let you know which way to go. Okay. Now, real quick, when we start to get out here in the weather, it's a little rainy today, it's a little gray, but we are in our fine state of Western Washington here. So, if you get out and prune, this isn't something you need to go today, tomorrow, next weekend. I had a pretty good frost at my house. I'm not totally dormant yet in Everett, very close to the nursery here. Other folks may be in winter already. Everything's lost its leaves, things have locked down. I hesitate to always prune in the fall because sap is still flowing. We want to make sure our plants go dormant. Then we can go ahead and prune over the winter. So I don't care if you go out in 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, at some point here over the winter, this is when we kind of attack the projects that we're talking about today, okay? Now, if we look at tools, nothing's worse than going out and mashing stems. We're going to butcher our plant because our tools are not sharp. So we're going to look at kind of what tools that you have access to in your garage or your tool shed that you can use for good pruning in the wintertime. Always a good pair of hand bypass pruners. I prune a lot here, my house, the Arboretum. So I've got Felcos, these are $100 pruner, might be a little bit much for some people. We carry a beautiful selection of Zenport pruners down there, $40, for a good quality pruner. It's kind of a Felco knockoff. That's phase one. Always have a good pair of bypass pruners. I got the little sheath that goes on the belt and I'm ready to go, wherever I am. Love sharpeners. Now we carry 2 different sharpeners. These are the easiest things to use ever. This is a little pocket sharpener. The discount today, get this for like $8. This is necessary for everybody. If I've got my pruners out, I can simply pull this out of my pocket and just run this along my blades and do some very quick sharpening. I've got ceramic or tungsten carbide. Either way, I'm going to have a nice sharp tool. It makes my hands easier to prune, going to make my job a little bit easier. So get a good sharpener. The other one is a little bit bigger. This one's got a little brush. I can put some oil in there if I need to. And again, I can take this and run it down the blades of my loppers, head shears, pruners. I know my wife stole my first one of these. It went into the kitchen because we can use this for knives and cleavers and some other simple things in the house as well. So a good quality sharpener is a must. I brought my bucket out of my garage, so I'll show you what I have here. And these are all the good ones. Now, good quality folding saw. You know, I probably use this tool as much as anything in my entire garage. When I'm working here, home, the Arboretum, this is an easy little pocket saw. I can throw in my pocket, or I've got a sheath for it. I whip that out and I can really get into tight places and make accurate cuts. Sometimes we have loppers. It's a little hard to get in to where we want to prune without leaving a dead stub again. If I got a saw, I can really get in there and make fine surgical cuts, have a much better looking prune job, and a very easy sharp saw. This is what we call pocket saw. We've got lots of these around. A little bit bigger one. You know, again, if I'm pruning a little bit larger limb, I just use a little bit easier saw to use. You know, hedge shears. I don't do a lot of hedge clipping this time of year. This would be one we talk a little bit more about June, or coming out of winter as we attack our laurels and boxwoods and different things in our yard. But a good sharp pair of hedge shears. You know, I like this one again by Zenport because I've got extendable handles. I can pop this out. It's a very useful tool. Get up a little taller, get a little farther away from myself. But that's a great quality hedge shear. And then loppers. You know, I don't use loppers quite as much. I still have a couple pairs in the garage, and it's not that I never use them. I do some. But if you get a good quality pair of loppers, these are again made by Zenport, high quality, really heavy duty, but lightweight with the aluminum handles. This is the mini vine lopper. And we've got the big full-size one. You can kind of see the difference. So I think for a lot of home gardeners, the mini loppers are excellent. You know, roses, again, tighter spots that I can get into without having to use so much leverage to try to get a branch cut. So look at a good pair of loppers as well. So take a look at some tools. We'll talk about discounts at the end. We'll certainly have all that on special, but especially the sharpeners. Nothing drives me crazier than folks going out and doing the right thing, and they got some crappy old dull pruners, and you're not going to get a very good prune job done. So those sharpeners are really cheap and an excellent way to keep them sharp day after day, month after month, year after year. Okay. Now, real quick, before we talk some more plants, I'm going to show you a few slides here. Let me share my screen. Just one second. And we'll just show you a couple of tips here as we go. So there's me, in case you forgot who I was already. Someone inevitably asked what CPH is, Certified Professional Horticulturist. That means I'm a plant geek. How's that? Now, if we look at, again, some close-up pictures, if you couldn't see, you can always go back and watch this class. It's being recorded. Those are a couple of types of the little bypass or hand pruners. So there's a picture of the Zenports there with the red handle. Ratchet Pruners is another option that maybe I don't have the hand strength to just cut all the way through, but I can click, click, click and prune a little bit easier sometimes. Ratchet style hand pruner may be one for you. There's a picture of the loppers I talked about and the pole pruner. Mine's right over here. I won't bring it in because it's like 12 feet long, but I think this is a great tool for a lot of homeowners. You know, arborists, pruning services tend to be a little spendy. If you're comfortable doing this sort of stuff yourself, a good quality pole pruner is the way to go. You know, you see the difference with that one is on my garage floor. When I took the picture, I can attach a saw blade to it. That's got a chain, not rope. So I've got a rope to pull, but I have a chain pulley system that's much heavier duty. And I can get up about 16 feet with that and really do some good pruning on it, whether I'm sawing or just lopping branches out. That's a great one for the wintertime. As again, we talk about thinning trees. We'll see some pictures of that here. Then we've got kind of a giraffe style pruner if you like a long reach with a little handle grip. And there's a picture of those head shears as well. The sharpener, that's the heavier one that's got the oil and the handle. Again, I think that little pocket sharpener is a great little one to tuck in the pocket or the tool belt as well. Now, just as we kind of look at some diagrams here, because we're going to talk plants in a minute, and this will hopefully give you a little idea as we go through some things fast and furious style. You know, we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about pinching. You know, that's kind of something that we would do more on the season or annuals, perennials. We want to pinch down more of a herbaceous or fleshy plant to create a bushy or lower one to maximize flower. So, you know, again, think of your containers and things like that. You know, shearing, you know, again, it's too late in the year. We do not want to go out and shear back evergreens, hedges, all that stuff should wait till spring at this point. We have to, you know, in essence, the basics of what's the definition of pruning. I want to encourage new growth. So if I go out and prune something right now and we do stay warm, here comes new leaves, here comes Mother Nature with the hard frost, and we're going to have some foliage damage. We'll have to go back and clean that up again in the spring. So if you haven't done your shearing on a lot of your evergreens or hedge material, don't freak out. We got time to do it in spring. It's not the end of the world. We can do it then as well. Okay. Now again, you'll see those two main things that I'm focusing on today are thinning and heading back. I want to open up structure for air, sun, plant health, less disease, all kinds of good reasons to thin. Heading back is more of a directional thing. You're too tall, you're too wide, you're on my porch, you know, you're stuck into the siding of my house. Do I head you back or just remove that limb at the trunk? There's a lot of options for that here in the winter as well. Now, just a couple basic diagrams here. And again, you go back and look at these. These are some old school black and whites that I've had for years. But if you look at kind of the little branch diagram, you know, these are things that we're talking about, you know, terminal buds, lateral buds, you know, where are we pruning to if we're going to take the time to do this right? A terminal bud is always going to give me height or length of a stem. If I head back, that's what I'm pruning out is my terminal bud, and I'm cutting to a lateral one. Now I can create bushiness and have a fuller plant as we go forward. So there's all kinds of different types you'll see on the buds. Now, if we look at the one on my right there is kind of a little simple deciduous plant. You know, I just bought a new shrub this year. It's lost its leaves. You know, what do I look at? Honestly, we could call that a camellia if we magically put leaves on it. It's simple plant structure. And as we look at how those plants grow, I'm hoping that will help you make a decision. How do I want to prune this? Am I okay with height? Do I need to shear it back? Am I going to get in and thin out a little bit? If you look at some of those things on a plant, yes, we want to remove suckers and water sprouts. Maybe we want to limb it up off the ground a little bit. Maybe in your garden it needs to be up off the ground. All those things are fine to do, you know, for your specific spot in your specific garden. Now there's a real close-up if you couldn't see me kind of with the wall here doing the pruning, but that's essentially what I'm talking about. If we just go back to, I'm going to take my hand pruners and I'm going to make a good pruning cut. I'm not going to go flat. I'm not going to leave those stubs. I'm not going to go too close to the bud that I want to grow. I'm going to keep a nice angled cut with our amount of rain and wet we get here in the winter. I think it's always wise to not go flat. Then we've got a chance for that water to run off the cut till it heals and we're fine. You know, as long as we're talking about those two words, cut and heal, you know, I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of pruning paste and pruning sealers and all the rest of this. You know, 20, 30 years ago, everybody sealed things up. We haven't sold pruning sealer for a couple decades. You know, maybe if I had an old tired fruit tree that had a hole in it, yes, maybe I need to seal it up, but we don't need to run out and paint all these cuts we make on our trees and shrubs. I would rather have you let that plant heal itself with its own enzymes, callus itself up, and then we've got a happy plant come springtime. So take a look at that, you know, not too angled, not too flat, kind of not too cold, not too warm, just right, you know, just like the porridge, right? Now, there's a couple, I hope, diagrams where you can kind of see a before and after. So especially that thinning one, you know, everybody, if they don't, they should have some nice trees in their yard, whether it's shade trees, Japanese maples, we could call this a bunch of different options. But if I look at that diagram there, you know, is there anything necessarily wrong with the before tree? You know, maybe not. Maybe there's some dead wood in the center that you don't see much. And is it the end of the world? Perhaps not. But if I want to optimize my tree and have it be extremely healthy, that is a picture after thinning. I haven't changed the structure. I haven't topped it. I'm not butchering it in any way. I hope I'm not insulting anybody, but I see butchered trees all over the place all the time. So if I want to let that tree attain its natural beauty, that's what I want to do. I want to look up there in the wintertime, hopefully against some blue sky and not gray, get my pole pruner out, climb on my little ladder, and do some thinning. I want to open up that structure, get rid of all the dead wood, get rid of crossing limbs. You can see those two diagrams. Again, the silhouette has not changed, but I've changed the structure in the interior to give myself a much, much better looking tree that's going to be a lot healthier for years and years to come. Okay. Same with the heading. You know, maybe for me, this is probably more of a fruit thing that we'll talk about a little bit more in January at the production class. You know, I would not go out and head back my Japanese maples, my flowering trees. There's a lot of trees that I wouldn't do it with. Maybe you need to at some point, but they're not going to look so swell until they get a chance to regrow. But fruit is one we almost want to head back and keep low and spreading and horizontal so we can pick it all. You know, I don't need a 30-foot apple tree. I'd rather have a 10 or 12-foot apple tree that I can get at all the fruit on it. So if you look at that thing again, we can still thin it, nothing changes, but maybe that's the one that maybe I do want to head back here and there a little bit to create the structure that I want long term. Now, if we look at large limbs real quick, because this is one I think comes up over the winter. You know, I don't have a magic crystal ball to say, yes, we're going to get 2 feet of snow, or yes, we're going to get a nasty windstorm at Thanksgiving, or all the other things that happen here off and on over my 50 years. But if I do walk out and I have something that snaps, or maybe again, my tree is too low to the ground and I want to get it up a little bit so I can garden underneath it, you know, don't go out with the chainsaw and drop your chainsaw on it and says, let's just saw that limb off. What's going to happen? It's going to crack and it's going to peel, and you're probably going to do some damage to the tree itself. If I'm going to take a large limb like that, I'm going to make a notch cut. Then I can sever it and snap it off of there. Then I can go back and get a nice clean third cut right to the collar so that it heals properly. I don't want to leave a stub, and I definitely don't want to just chainsaw down and let that thing snap and tear my bark away. You know, it's just like skin on you and I. We don't need to peel our skin all the way down the side of us. We want to make sure we keep that bark nice and healthy and get a good clean cut if we're going to remove a heavy, dangerous limb, something that broke this winter in a windstorm. Or again, a lot of trees, I think limbing up would solve some problems. We get more light underneath them. We've got happier understory plants, and we've got a more attractive tree long term. Now, if we look at the term multi-stem, and this is kind of a blanket a term that we could put on probably 100 shrubs that are sitting outside the classroom right now. You know, if I'm going to grow as a shrub and I've got more than one trunk, magnolia, lilacs, forsythia, quince, vine maples, barberry. I mean, we could just list the majority of the popular plants around here, some evergreen and deciduous. You know, if I took all the leaves off, that's the structure I'm looking at. I've got more than one trunk at the base, and I'm going to kind of grow up like a vase shape. You know, a lot of plants will attain that. Now, if you look at kind of the before and after, again, do I need to run out and do this every year? Maybe not, but while it's dormant, take a minute, walk through the yard, not look at this, but look inside of it and look for pieces that are rubbing on each other or two that are going the same direction. We get a little pocket saw. That's what I do a lot with my little pocket saw. I can dive right in there at the base and remove one of those trunks and get it out of there. Now, again, I've opened that plant up. I've got more sun. I've got more airflow. I've got less disease. A lot of benefits to doing some thinning on multi-stem plants. So again, if you're wondering maybe what you have, we'll ask that in the questions, but that's a great tip on a lot of the common shrubs that we have here in Western Washington. Now, if we kind of at the end here do a little bit of tree issues. Now that one I've looked and found a few years ago, but I thought it was a pretty good diagram where you could kind of see I've got a broken limb, I've got a water sprout, I've got something crossing. If you look at that, the names in that diagram, you can see, you know, dead wood and this and that in your yard and kind of look at the same thing. Look at your tree and say, okay, I'm not going to change the overall outline or the silhouette of it, but if I dig into the middle of it, I can get that dead branch out. I can get those two that are crossing. I can get that one that's got partially broken out of there. I can get weak wood. All these things, I can tidy up my tree and really have a healthier tree going long term, okay? Now, just to remind you, I mean, this, if I was to try to teach you a couple rules here today, you know, those are the two rules to me. The 1/3 rule, which I will raise my hand, as probably every gardener that's on this class. We've all broken that rule and we can get away with it on some plants, not others, but you're always going to be safe if we stick to 1/3 of height or 1/3 of spread in a season. If I go more than that, some plants won't care, but you're going to be safe if you stick to that rule. I've broken it a number of times in my yard just to try and play around. If it comes back great, if it doesn't, oh well. You know, that's at the point where we try it perhaps, but you're always going to be safe with that 1/3 height or width in a season. The prune after bloom is one I would always live by. I mean, there's no real exceptions to that to me in the gardening world. If I have a plant and I know it blooms in March, I am not going to go out and prune it in the winter because I'm going to cut all my flower buds off and I'm not going to get the reward the coming spring. So if you think of everything that goes through the course of the year here, we really want to try to prune it after bloom. That's always a great rule to live by. And as you kind of journey around your own landscape and look when different things are in color, if you do need to rejuvenate something, cut it back, get it ready to go, it's right after bloom is the best time. Now we can reflush with foliage, set our flower buds, and we're back in business next year. You know, think of our state flower, rhododendron. You know, we're not doing anything evergreen this time of year, but let's just pretend, you know, this was March and my rhodie bloomed in May. You know, why in God's green earth would I go out and cut my rhodie back right before it flowered? Let's enjoy the blooms that come out on it. Then we can do whatever we want, regrow in the summer, set our flower buds, and I've got a happy plant again going for the next year, okay? Now, those last two things, you know, probably more tips for me. You know, I would always have a purpose. You know, if I think back, you know, to growing up as a kid and gardening with my folks and grandmother and this and that, you know, oh my God, it's the winter time, the snow is flying, it's cold, let's get out and prune everything in the yard. You know, that's not what this class is. You know, let your plant tell you if it needs a prune job or not, or maybe your neighbors if the lawyer is threatening to sue you for blocking their view. But there's all kinds of reasons to prune. To me, have a purpose. You know, is it the view? Is it too big? Is it unhealthy? Is it got disease? Is it bad structure? You know, I want more bloom. I want more fruit. I want more berries. You know, those are always great reasons to go out and try to maximize your effort with pruning, but it doesn't mean that we have to do this every single year on every single plant, okay? In the wintertime, I would focus on that last one there. Attack structure issues in the winter at minimum. Go out and look out at your yard. Look for these things that we've looked at in these diagrams: crossing branches, half broken wood, pieces laying on the ground, limbing things up. These are the things that we've got great access to and very safe to do here over the winter. So we're good to go for next spring again, okay? Now, again, you'll see that last thing, prune evergreens coming out of winter. I want to say that again because somebody's going to go out and knock back their laurel hedge or boxwood after listening to this class. It's not going to look very good all winter, and you're going to take a chance of having some frost damage. So leave it alone and do this out of winter time. So then we've got a chance for it to quickly regrow, get nice and green again, and off we go. And again, we haven't had a good hard frost, in my opinion. I think it's probably coming in the coming weeks, but there's no rush to go out and do this today or next weekend. Wait till your landscape is dormant and then start attacking these projects, okay? Now, last one here, we'll talk about on special at the end, but you know, I think a fall pruning class should always have a quick little mention of a dormant spray. You know, do I need to buy these two things and go spray my whole landscape? Absolutely not. But I would ask you as a gardener or a homeowner, what did you have problems with during this year? And what are you worried on certain plants going in to 2022? So if I had any issue with, you know, let's pick a fruit tree. Maybe I had apple maggot and scab on my fruit tree. Hey, I want all that cleaned up. I don't want anything on the ground. I don't want things hanging on my tree. I want that all done this fall. And then I want to make sure I apply a combination of these two dormant sprays because that will make sure that I am clean going into next spring, okay? So it could be a rose, it could be our fruit, excuse me. It could be just about anything. if you had a problem with it or you're looking to protect your specimen going into the next year, look at a good natural dormant spray like this. Horticultural oil, all organic, a superior protection against insects in the winter. Liquid Cop's a natural fungicide that contains copper. Those two can be mixed together in the same spray jar and very effective against all the broad spectrum of things, the majority of anything you could get on that plant. So consider a little dormant spray as well, okay? So there's us. Like I said, this is recorded. You can go back and look at pictures. Our web address is right there, as well as our email if you want to send us any notes, all right? So we just kind of touched a little bit on what, see what we're doing for time, Nicole. We're doing okay today. If, you know, we look at things that I would look at pruning this winter. So I'm going to mention a couple things because doing this for about 30 years, I would say there's definitely a top 10 list of how many questions come in on the same plant every year like clockwork. So I'm going to pick a few, hopefully, and maybe Steve already answered a few of them, but we'll see here. So again, I'll mention this for the 8th time. Wait on your evergreens. We're not going out and pruning back things that have foliage in the winter. I'm going to go start borrowing some tips of conifers for wreath making here pretty quick. That's certainly okay. I wouldn't tell you not to do that. But evergreen broadleaf plants, let's wait till coming out of winter to prune at this point. You know, again, I'm looking at structure is my main thing. I'm going to tour my yard a number of times over the winter months and look up at my trees. Looks great. No, I want to get rid of that one limb. No, this needs to get limbed up a little bit. Look at those structure issues, because this is the time of year when you've got much better access to it, much easier time to get in there and prune without all the foliage on, okay? Again, I mentioned the fruit and berry thing. You know, we could teach probably an hour class on pruning apples, for goodness sakes. We're going to try this a little different next year. Tune in mid-January. That class is going to be titled Pruning for Production, and we're really going to focus on fruit, edibles, and berries coming out of winter, because those are the things I would rather have you go out and prune towards the tail end of winter, not November, December, but more like late January, February into early March. So we wait a little bit on some of those, okay? Now, roses, this is always the second part of roses, and a lot of folks I know are growing some great roses around our area. We kind of want to go hip high in the fall is always my rule, and that's Veterans Day. We're coming up here on Veterans Day here in about a week. You know, again, I've still got some flowers on a couple of my roses, so I may wait another week or two, depends on what the weather does. But we do want to make sure we get those roses cut back a little bit in the fall so we don't have breakage, we don't have snow damage, we've got a little bit easier plant. Then come springtime, like President's Weekend, now we go down there to the knee high. So if you remember, hip high in the fall, knee high comes springtime, that's going to give you a much better structure on the rose. I would just focus on getting the height cut down this time of year. We'll worry about stripping the leaves and cutting back anything smaller to pencil and cleaning up the structure come February, you know, before we start going for 2022 on the roses, okay? Now, grasses is one of my favorite. I got ornamental grasses all over my landscape, evergreens, perennial types. You know, they're in full plume right now, I call it, not bloom, but we've got plumes coming out. I'm not going to run home and cut down all my grasses just yet, but later in November and December, you know, I'm kind of the OCD. I like the stuff out of my yard. So yes, I will go out and cut a lot of those back and get that cleaned up. I don't care if you do it in November, December, or next February, but before we start to grow again for 2022, we have to get those perennial grasses cut down at some time this winter. Just zip them off a couple inches above the ground. All the miscanthus, anything that turns color, goes brown, and goes dormant for the winter, we want to start those over again. If it's an evergreen grass, let's wait and attack that in spring. You want to leave those alone, wait till say 1st of April, throw a little bit of fertilizer on there. If I had some hair, we would grab the hair up like a little clump and zip it off. And now we can start that grass over again on the evergreen side, okay? Heathers is always one of my bugaboos because I hear more people that are heather haters than any plant around. Heather's a great, easy, low maintenance little shrub. Right now, we've got winter heathers, you know, and they're just starting to bloom. What else am I going to get from my yard that's going to bloom all through the winter months till March? You know, this is a great little winter heaths or winter heathers. Now, the reason people don't like them is because they never prune them. So when this is done blooming towards the end of winter, I want to take my hedge clippers. I'm not going to spend an hour with my hand pruners, you know, out there going, oh, let's just take a little one here and a little one here. I want to take my shears and I want to just shear this back lightly. I want to cut down below where the flowers were, round it off a bit. Now I'm going to have a nice, tight, dense heather plant forever. If I do this once a year, it'll only take you 5 minutes. We'd have a dense bloomer, maximum flower every year. And we're not going to end up with that big open woody donut in the middle. That's what everybody says. Oh, I know what you mean. I got a donut heather. It's all green and I got a woody center that I can't get to fill back in. If we shear that, again, coming out of winter when they're done blooming, that prune after bloom roll, we're going to have great looking heathers going forward. Lavender is another one. I get asked more about lavender. What's wrong with my lavender? How do I prune my lavender? Everybody loves lavender. It's a great little plant. Again, I'm not going to do anything this time of year. Maybe I've got dried flower stalks on there that I can remove. But if I'm going to cut this back, I'm going to wait till coming out of winter. I'm going to shear that back in there where I still have foliage. And I'm going to have, again, a nice, dense pincushion lavender that's going to maximize my flowering for that season, okay? If we let lavender go, what happens? I get foliage up here and I've got a bunch of dead open wood at the base. Now I'm at the point where I have to take a chance. Okay, if I nip this off and break the 1/3 rule, will it come back or won't it come back? Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But if I want that, around here we've got Squim, you know, the lavender festival. I want these big 3-foot pincushions of lavender to enjoy. That's shearing. We want to make sure we prune after bloom and keep those much tighter, okay? And then the last one we pruned a couple is hydrangeas, and this is probably the #1 asked question that I know our place and a lot of other nurseries is, what do I do with my hydrangea? So we talk about that at about 8 classes a year, including the hydrangea classes. But again, just real quick, because I think almost every gardener's got a couple really cool hydrangeas in their yard. What kind do you have is always the question. If I have a round flower, I have a Mop Head Hydrangea. You can see when I brought in here, it's not dormant yet. It's much softer wood. It's still green. I'm not going to go out and cut this back this time of year. I'm going to wait till the end of winter. I want to walk out and do my pruning like 1st of March is when I want to walk out and set my structure for a hydrangea for the year. I want to walk out in the fall and remove my spent blossoms. That's all I want to do. I want to get the weight off the stems. We don't have anything to break. I want to deadhead it, walk away, let leaves turn yellow, turn to slime. I've got all my wood structure there. I'm going to dive in the winter, maybe look at the crown. Again, I'm looking for dead wood, crossing pieces. I could do that for sure. But if I'm going to head a hydrangea back down to control the height, I want to do that in March, okay? Now, the second part of this discussion is, what type of Mop Head Hydrangea do you have? Because there's a lot of old school ones that, again, if I prune it back hard, no flowering the next year. I'm not going to hurt my plant. If you don't know what you have, probably Steve's answering 5 of them right now, cut it back and see what happens next year. If you cut your hydrangea back and it grows up with luscious green leaves and it looks great, but I got minimal flower, then we put a note in the brain that says, okay, I got an old wood hydrangea bloomer. I can't cut it back that hard or I'm not going to get the reward the next summer, okay? Well, most of the new school hydrangeas, probably 95% of what we sell here in Sunnyside during the whole course of the year is this new generation hydrangea that blooms on old and new wood. So now you can do whatever you want. You know, if you got a new wood bloomer like mine, I'm able to cut it back in March to a comfortable height and have a smaller flower with a smaller plant with maximum flower that way, okay? Now, the first one I pruned, if you remember, was that PG hydrangea. And just keep in mind, if you have those, that is always a new wood bloomer. So you could do whatever you want to that PG hydrangea come March. Cut it back, leave it alone. I want it big, I want it small. Totally up to you. That's one that we will not sacrifice flowering whatsoever. So do what you like with pruning on PG types, okay? So hopefully that cut a little bit of the hydrangeas out of there. Now, the last one I'll mention, to me, that's a must do in the winter is lace leaf maple. Now, I think it's one of the nicest plants that we can have in our yards here. I don't care if you got a green one, a red and green one, an orange. there's so many great flavors of lace leaf. But when I say that, we were talking about the little weeping umbrella maples. Probably, I hate to tell you, the most expensive plant in most landscapes. You know, an old lace leaf maple is truly a specimen to me. It's something every house should have. Now, that is a plant, if you think of your lace leaf maple and you're thinking June and you look out there, how would you ever get in there in the summer and do any kind of accurate pruning? Because it's filled with leaves, it's weeping, you can't see anything. So the winter time is when we have to do those. And again, I wouldn't rush out and do it in the next month. You know, wait till it goes dormant. I know mine in my front yard already has, but I'm not going to go do a lot of pruning. Probably save it for February or so. Sometime this winter, walk out and try to get plant cleaned up. You know, I won't say anything too harsh, but nothing is worse than driving around and seeing a lace leaf maple. It's like, I really just want to get out of my truck, grab my pruners and fix that for you, because the whole underside of it's got dead wood. It's all a mess. And if you properly prune a lace leaf, you've seen them in magazines, and it's the nicest, it could be the nicest plant in your whole landscape. They are beautiful for structure, for color, even in the wintertime. So if I, think of it this way, if you haven't touched yours for a while, I'd pick a day, probably not that's too rainy, strap on the raincoat, crawl underneath that thing and lay on your back and look up, and look up at the structure and go, what is this mess? Because I bet you don't even need pruners. You grab your gloves, you just start feeling wood and it just starts snapping out of there. It doesn't mean it's diseased. There's nothing wrong with it. But as that plant grows on top of itself year after year, you end up with that big shell of discolored dead wood underneath. I bet you went out there and snapped all that out of there, crawled out there and looked. You probably fixed 75% of your problem right there. You're probably like, oh my God, it looks like a brand new plant. Because getting rid of that dead wood, again, air, so on, it's just going to be a much happier plant. Then we can walk around the perimeter and say, you're on top of my shrub, you're hanging on my lawn, whatever else, and we can head this up a little bit and fix the structure. So if I borrowed one little piece because I couldn't haul it, but let's imagine, here's a lace leaf maple. We're kind of going out of a trunk and we're heading downwards. If I look at the structure of that, if this is on my grass, I'm not just going to grab my pruners and lop it off. I want to follow this longest piece here up. I could go right here. I just got rid of a 1.5 feet of length. I've got 2 branches that'll go down and do the same thing as before. I could even go all the way up to there, and I've still got my weeping shape. It's not going to change. But I've cut back all that height, so now I can just regrow down. And I can kind of play that game every year or two and keep it a little bit more contained, okay? So heading it back is one thing. And then for me, I like it very open. I like to see the branching. So I can always go in and thin. I'm just going to go in here and pick some little pieces here and there to open up that shape so I can see the wood and the flow of that specimen. So hopefully that helped. That's a hard one to do in class because it's a dark color wood, but you can see, that's the one that I would say, I think most everybody's got a lace leaf in their yard. You've got to do that at some time this winter because that is a really tough one. A lot of people come in here in May, June, July with the picture. What do I do to this? I'm not quite sure because I can't even see anything in there because it's so thick and bushy. Leave it alone. Wait till that fall or temporarily pick up some of those branches that maybe are laying on the ground and get them headed back up so they got a chance to regrow, and we can go back that next winter and fix it once and for all, okay? That's a lot of plants. That's a lot of pruning. There's a little information overload. I'm guessing Steve got a lot of questions, but we're gonna talk a couple things for the class, and then we'll see if you got any left for me. So like always at Sunnyside, we do some great class discounts. So you saw a couple things I brought out of my home garage. The one thing we don't sell that I did bring, because everyone always asks me, what do you do to your pruners? That's my prehistoric, dusty, 25-year-old little tin of 3-in-1 oil. That sits on my garage bench. That's what goes on the pruning junctions, the blades, it'll help protect rust, keep things lubricated properly. So get some 3-in-1 oil. But if we look at all the other tools we talked about today, the pole pruners, the size, the sharpeners, I think is a must for everybody. All those things, 20% off. Just come down here this week. Starts today through next Friday. Tell me you're at the pruning seminar. Wanted to grab a couple of the cool tools that Trevor was talking about, make my life easier. And there you go. You got 20% off at the register. The Dormant Sprays, I only do this a couple times a year. That's one of our most popular sales item here, is that combination. I brought a bottle because I don't have the slide anymore. Horticultural oil and liquid cap, okay? I can take those in the same sprayer. It's a great dormant spray. And honestly, you should always read the label of all these products. But if you looked at the label of that, it's going to tell you can use that all year long. I mean, that could be a spray that you could utilize out of 12 months, you probably use it for 10 months of the year for disease control or insect control. Very effective as long as it's not 90. And I could probably count how many days were 90 degrees last year on both my hands. So as long as we avoid, maybe to be safe, we avoid mid-July through August, rest of the year, it could be a great spray for you, not just as a dormant one, okay? Last one is the gloves. This is always my favorite class because we put the 2 best gloves on special, 20% off. So this has always been a go-to for our class students. We were having live classes here a couple years ago and before. I bet you 200 pairs of these gloves would go out of here because everyone's like, ooh, that's warm, that's dry, I'll take it. So this is waterproof and insulated, so warm. I got big hands and I'm a warm guy anyway. So I don't do these as much anymore because they're a little warm for my hands. I get this is the new one, which I replaced mine. So this is the same thing without the insulation, okay? So waterproof. You want to go out and do some work and you can still feel your fingers. You can still do some work. That's not a crazy bulky glove. I think they're both great choices for Pacific Northwest gardeners. So come down and take advantage of the 20% off these. Not to sound like Target or anywhere else, but Christmas is coming. We only have what did I see the other day? 50 days till Christmas or some ridiculous number. Stocking stuffer, get some gloves, get a sharpener. You got a gardener in the family. Those are both great Christmas gifts. All right. So there's some discounts. Last couple of things I'll mention. We're kind of winding down the 2021 class. It's kind of a bummer because I love doing these, but we'll be back in January. Next Saturday, so last time you get to see my ugly mug on Zoom here, I'm doing Helibores next Saturday, 10 a.m. So we'll have a fun seminar. We call them the winter jewels of the garden. We'll talk all kinds of Helibores, a great evergreen perennial that blooms over the winter. We got a fabulous selection. We'll be going through all that next Saturday as kind of our last class of the year. Saturday the 20th, it's Christmas time. Christmas trees come in that next week. We got wreath making starting on the 20th. I'll be out pruning like a madman, getting greens all over the place. If you don't know about Sunnyside's wreaths, check it out online or come down and make an appointment in one of our wreath rooms. It's a great family, friends fun. Make some really cool custom wreaths. We get some fun evergreens. This isn't just the little rubber stamped, I'll take my little wreath home. We have some people walk out with wreaths that I'm not quite sure what door they're going to hang it on because it's that big. So you can make whatever you like in the wreath room. All right. So November 20th, it starts up. So I'm probably tired. Did I make it, Nicole? I did make it. So I'm probably getting tired of talking here. Let's see if we got any questions left after Mr. Smith probably got them all.
Yeah, he's been answering quite a bit here in the back. You guys have had some really great questions all across the spectrum. So it's good. Keep them coming if you've got any other questions. Real quick, like Trevor mentioned, our 2022 classes, we're about to publish those soon. So stay tuned. Like he said, our first one's going to happen that very first weekend in January. For those of you that have been attending our classes for a while, we've got our tried and trues, but we're switching it up next year. We're changing some of our topics, kind of retargeting them based on your feedback. What do you want to hear? What's kind of happening now in the gardening world? So hopefully you'll be able to join us again in 2022 and keep an eye out for those classes. Those should be coming out in the next month or so once we finalize with all of our speakers and perhaps some sponsors. So super exciting stuff. On to questions, because Steve's still, feverishly typing back here. Somebody's asking about when to prune your Helibores.
Helibores. Well, we'll talk about that next Saturday, but you get a little preview. I would always, this is me, you don't have to do it this way. I always walk out right at Christmas and cut all the leaves off my Helibores. I don't want anything left from the year before. I want to look at the crown, remove all of the old foliage, open that up, see all the flowers pop out, brand new leaves come out, and I've got a brand new plant going in for the next season. So if you watch it, during the course of the year, remove leaves that might get yellowy or different color that are spent. But if you're going to prune it, I would always start hellebores over once a season, typical garden hellebores that we grow. There are some exceptions, but we would cut all that old foliage off. Typically with hellebore, the complaint I hear is I've got a big, huge green leaf, and underneath it, I've got all my aphids and whiteflies and all the little bugs like to hang out over the winter because they're sheltered. They've got sugar to eat. By cutting that off, I've never had to spray, worry about it whatsoever. I go out there right at Christmas, cut all my leaves off, then I get to enjoy the full flowering and get fresh foliage that way.
Excellent. Somebody asked about hydrangeas. Do you fertilize them now or after pruning?
Yeah, again, and this isn't just for hydrangeas. I would never do, fertilize your lawn once in the fall with a good organic fertilizer, but I'm not, unless I'm putting something new into the ground and I'm using something organic, very mild. We don't fertilize in the fall at all. We want to encourage no growth. And with the amount of rain we get, most of that fertilizer is going to flush through the soil and not be as effective come the next year. So I would walk out mid-February, 1st of March, mid-March. That's when we want to feed everything going into 2022, and then maybe a second dose in that late May, June timeframe. You'll have happy plants if you do that.
Gotcha. I'm going to answer this one live instead of typing it out. People ask all the time if we do any sort of gardening tool class and how to maintain or keep them sharp. Truthfully, we've done it in the past, and it was exciting for those small bits of people that were interested in it. And it wasn't something that just kind of stayed on our class list. It is something that's really useful. So if you've got specific questions, email them over. It's not something that we're dedicating an entire class to, but we're happy to talk about it. It's a really important part of your gardening world. So if you've got specific tools you're curious about, send us an email. Trevor's showing here. I'll let him talk and give you some more info.
These two, I'm telling you, for most all your little, hories and head shears and hand pruners and most everything that you use every day, you can do it all with this. You don't have to break them apart, get the grinder out, sit there and burn down edges. I do that maybe once every couple years with most of my tools in the winter, but this is the way to go. You keep them sharp day after day. You're not going to have to go back and spend a fortune or a lot of time kind of starting, whoa, what happened to that after 10 years? Now I got to really sharpen it out. I would also add to that, look on the internet. It's something we tried here, like Nicole said. It's kind of hit or miss. Everyone seems to be interested in it, and then we actually do it and nobody comes, to be honest with you. But there's a lot of services that travel around. I know at the Arboretum, we have a guy come down once a year in Everett. There's some good people that drive around and set up shop at different locations during the season. You can find one of those. You can literally go down and drop your stuff off. He'll take care of it for you, and then pick it up. Do it that way.
Yeah, excellent. So since we opened this door, there's another question about it. What about serrated pruners? How do you manage those?
Yeah, that's a little tougher one because you're not going to be able to use the simple tools on those. I'll be honest, the saws, the quality of the saws these days are going to last you for years before you'd have to replace it. And when I get to that point, and I do a lot of pruning, mind you, but it's probably every 8, 9, 10 years for me, I just go get another one because it's not, I would probably pay the same price to go take it to a shop and have them sharpen it for me versus just going and buying a brand new one. I would say typically you're going to have to go to like a knife or a cutlery shop to have something a little fancier like that done.
There's a question about a Hearty Fuchsia. This person said they can't wait until spring. How much can I prune it?
I'll be honest, that's a tough one with me. Hearty Fuchsia and also Salvia, I would throw into that same discussion. I don't like to do a lot in the fall on those. I would almost rather, I don't know, maybe I'm guessing snow burden and not home till like next April. I would rather have you just leave it alone, and when you get back, prune it back next April even is fine. We don't need to really do those in the winter. I worry about those. I've talked to a lot of gardeners over the years that maybe prune those back at some point in the winter and then lose a lot of wood and sometimes lose their plant if we get a cold winter. Leave those alone. As long as you're not back till like next June, as long as it was sometime in April, I would vote for you just walking away from it right when you get back next spring. Look down on the wood and you'll see all kinds of spots where you can cut it back to, and then off we go for 2022.
Quick circle back to the pruning items. Do you know of anybody that we recommend that will come out and kind of help if you haven't maintenanced your tools in a long time, somebody that will kind of sharpen them for you?
I would look online. The guy I'm trying to think, I don't remember his name, but I think it was called Northwest Sharpening Service. He kind of had a mobile truck that kind of popped around locations. He sets up on almost a weekend all year long during spring, summer, fall. I mean, you can find him. It might be a little bit of a drive. As far as somebody to come to your house, I don't know if he does that. You probably have to do some searching on the internet. I'm sure there's somebody that's like, oh yeah, I'll bring over everything we need. I mean, come over there and get it done for you.
Okay, cool. Somebody is asking about upright yews. Can you trim them now? They're thin and old and thinned out. And what do we do about those?
You know, again, it's not the end of the world. If I want to do a conifer here in the fall, I would rather lean towards having you do it right coming out of winter, because that's right when the sap's flowing again. If you cut it back, we're going to get immediate regrowth. If you cut it back now, it's going to look like you cut it back for the entire winter. And again, if we happen to get maybe a little colder spell than usual, perhaps would lose a little bit of the tip wood on it. I'm not sure what you mean by thin. If it's real woody, you know, use a really easy plant to shear back, you know, height and spread. If it's sparse and kind of thin, I would also say, you know, if it was me, I'd tell you walk out there like mid-March or so, do the pruning, get some rhododendron food on it, a good acidic fertilizer, apply the food, and then off we go for the spring.
Gotcha. How about ferns?
You know, ferns are one I would always do at the end of winter. You know, again, if it's a perennial fern, you know, it's going to melt here and do its thing, and you can go clean it up anytime you want in the winter. But I'm guessing she's talking about evergreen fern, tassel fern, sword fern, deer fern, things that I would want to have all the foliage all winter. So again, if you're walking out and seeing a black, a brown, something dead, get rid of it. You know, if you want to do it now, that's fine. But if you're going to start those over again, I do mine every March. You know, I'll walk out there to my deer and my sword fern in the shade garden, look down at the crown, I'll see the fiddleheads already starting to pop their way out. That's all brand new fronds for 2022. I'll take all of it off, you know, take every frond down to that crown, let it start over again. I got a brand new plant for next year.
Excellent. It looks like we've tackled everything. As always, we know that things come up. You know, as soon as we end the class, a question will pop up in your head, or you're outside working in your yard and realize that you're just not sure about something. We'd rather you ask so that you feel comfortable and confident doing work in your yard before making maybe a, you know, something that you have to kind of work your way back from. So send us an email, give us a call. We're happy to talk about your specific situation, look at pictures, whatever, give you good advice. So you're always welcome to reach out to us here at the nursery. We're here 7 days a week. I was going to say 24 hours a day. That's not real. We would all burn out really
Not quite.
I know, not quite. Sometimes it feels like it in the spring, but not quite. So give us an email. We're at sunnyside@msn.com. You can absolutely go back and check out this recording again on our YouTube channel, as well as our website. And hopefully we'll get to see you again next weekend for our last class of 2021. It feels kind of crazy that we're already at the end there. So hopefully we'll see you for Helibores, and we appreciate you spending your morning with us today. We'll see you later.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you next Saturday.